project-based learning. Um, so this is based on module 3, and most of them are practical sessions. We have session 1 up to the last bit session. It covers the information architecture and content planning, and in session 1 we are looking at documentation system audit and mapping. So the objective here is to evaluate an existing documentation ecosystem and design a unified architecture. So there's a scenario here where a SaaS company has fragmented documentation across GitHub, Notion, Google Docs, and internal wikis. So users and support teams tend to struggle to find the information. So now your task here is uh, you're provided with an inventory of all documentation. So you're supposed to use a spreadsheet template, not necessarily the GitHub one, the one that I've been able to share here, but you can also use an existing, just the usual Excel sheet, and create columns for source, owner, audience, status, last updated topics, just to help you keep up with the inventory, and then try to analyze the structural problems. So you have to identify the duplication aspect, outdated information, navigation issues, and even audience mismatch. And then you can try to visualize the current architecture. So the best way to go about this is by using Draw.io or Miro to map the existing documentation. If you've been able to interact with Draw.io, you realize it's a little bit more architectural. Let me try and look it up here. So most of the time we tend to use this to create flowcharts and online diagrams. So you can try to explore it on your own. It's a little bit loading there. Sorry about that. And also Miro, just for your own research purposes, you can try to look it up. So with that, you can be able to redesign unified architecture, whereby you have to apply modular and topic-based principles. That means you have to figure out how you can be able to produce TOC drafts, sidebar navigations, and also role-specific sections. So this is just based on what we had covered yesterday. You can try to picture out the best tool to use, but majorly Notion is way better, just because most of us are familiar with them. Also, we do have Confluence. I think we look at these tools later in a much more comprehensive format. So the deliverables based on section 1 is you're supposed to have a documentation inventory spreadsheet, and then you're supposed to have a diagram of current and proposed information architecture, and then an audit report with actionable recommendations. So these are just some of the practical sessions based on module 3 that you can explore on your own. They're very important, for practice purposes. Then we have section 2, building a product documentation architecture. So the objective here is to design a full documentation system for a product using the information architecture principles that we had covered yesterday. And a simple scenario here is a cloud-based collaboration platform with multiple user roles like developers, admins, and even end users. So the tasks, one is to define the roles and goals. That basically means you have to map each role's documentation needs from the onboarding, task execution, and even troubleshooting. Then you're supposed to create a modular documentation structure. And this will involve sections in this order. We have product overview, then we have the getting started section, user guides, admin guides, developer documentations, API reference, and then release notes. So all these documentation structures are very important. And remember yesterday when we were talking about modular structure, this is now a way in which you can be able to try and put it in practice. So the classified topics here, we have the concept where we're supposed to picture out what exactly is a workspace And then now the task is for you to create a workspace. And then now here we have a reference where you're supposed to come up with API endpoints for webhooks. And then we have design navigation. So this is where you're looking at sidebar menus, breadcrumbs, anchor links, and even role-based TOCs. The practical resources, just to give you a structure, we have the MacDocs material for repository structure, and then we have the GitHub docs templates. Let's explore the MacDocs material for repository structure. Let me see if I can be able to. Awesome. I hope my screen is visible to all of you. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm not leaving anyone behind. So when it comes to the material for MacDocs, this is just this is where you get to write your documentation in Markdown and just be able to create professional static sites. In minutes, let me just put my phone on silent. Sorry about that. So let's try to explore the getting started section. So here you're supposed to check through, first of all, how you can be able to install this. And the documentation now is here to guide you through that whole process, from the installation to how you can be able to create your own site. So this material is a little bit much more significant, and it uses Python. You can install material for it through these commands here, and when it comes to creating your site, this is how you get to go about it. So in most scenarios, you can explore this. Actually, it's even much way better. But again, you can go the direct route the way I've been doing, on either VS Code or GitHub, just by adding documentations on top of documentations. Let me see if I can get you a structure here. This structure here. So when you look at this, we have various kinds of readmes. In this concept, we're trying to picture out various kinds of documentations, and they are tailored in a way that, yeah. Yes, Stephanie? Stephanie, you're speaking on mute.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
I think maybe I'm not following. But what's the topic of discussion for today?
Oh, sorry. First of all, I was trying to picture out some of the assignments or other sessions that they can try to work on based on what we had covered yesterday. Today we're supposed to get to module 4, and that is what we're supposed to jump into.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So basically, what I'm trying to share with you is what you can explore on your free time. These labs here. Sorry about that. I've just gotten lost somewhere here. I hope no one is lost. Sorry about that.
So there is content available on your GitHub that we are supposed to review.
Yep. Yeah.
And then so you are going through the technical writing for engineering teams.
So this is the technical writing engineering labs that you can explore on your free time based on what we had covered in module 3, and most of them are just tasks that you can try to maybe explore as a product manager, as a software engineer. Exactly. So today we're
Okay.
supposed to continue from scratch from basically what we had covered yesterday.
All right, that's understood. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope no one else is lost. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that. Robert, Kathy, are we somewhere we good? A thumbs up will be great. Robert, Kathy, Stephen, are we good? Thank you, Kathy. Robert, are you here? Okay. Seems Robert is a little bit far from his mic.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Okay, I've lost something here.
I have a question.
Yes, please. Yes, Stephen. Yes, Stephen, can you hear me?
How do you access the lab?
How do
I
you
can't see it on
access
my.
how do you access the lab questions? That's what you mean.
Yeah. How do you access the lab?
Okay. Okay. So that is what I was sharing with all of you here. So you come to the just I'm on different repositories right now. They're confusing me. Sorry about that. So to access these labs, or rather the tasks, you come to the technical writing engineering labs. It's a public repository. You click on it, and then you come to module 3, where we have information architecture and content. You click on it, and this is it. So these are project-based learning that transform technical writing from theory into applied engineering. And these exercises here, they help in simulating real documentation challenges that are encountered in software companies, startups, and even product teams. So every lab here requires learners to analyze systems, structure knowledge, and even produce documentation artifacts that are used by software engineers, product managers, and even technical writers. So the reason why these labs are here is because they're intentionally designed to resemble an actual work performed in real organizations. So these are project-based learning philosophy, and the labs follow 4 engineering principles used in modern documentation teams, from documentation as an infrastructure to cross-functional documentation. Then we're looking at problem-driven learning. So just to quickly walk you through this, you realize that these labs follow 4 engineering principles used in modern documentation teams. One is documentation as an infrastructure, where documentation is treated as a structured system similar to software architecture. So here learners are supposed to design documentation systems, navigation structures, knowledge repositories, and even documentation pipelines. Then we have cross-functional documentation. So these are projects that simulate collaboration between engineers, product managers, support teams, and even technical writers. So basically, this documentation must serve multiple audiences simultaneously. And then we have problem-driven learning, where each lab begins with a realistic problem scenario, such as one, a chaotic internal wiki, two, a missing API documentation, and three, poor onboarding for developers, and then lastly, unstructured product documentation. So here, learners are supposed to solve the problem using the information architecture techniques that we had looked at yesterday. So we're still trying to connect what we covered yesterday with these labs, or these task questions here. So when it comes to deliverable driven training, we're trying to picture out how every project has to produce real artifacts. So from documentation blueprints, information architectural maps, structured documentation repositories, product documentation systems. And then now we have engineering lab 1. So in this section, we are trying to look at documentation system audit with an objective of ensuring that learners can be able to evaluate an existing documentation system and be able to redesign its structure using the information architectural principles. So exercises produce these exercises tend to help you as a technical writer at least be able to understand how a disorganized documentation looks like and how you can at least organize it. So a scenario here could be a growing SaaS company that has accumulated documentation across multiple platforms. You might be given maybe the GitHub readmes, the internal wikis, Google documentations, Notion pages, and even scattered API references. So developers cannot easily locate documentation in this scenario. And also you realize that maybe support teams repeatedly tend to answer the same questions. So even product managers maybe might be struggling to maintain these release notes. Now your task as a technical writer in this scenario is to audit the documentation system and try to redesign the architecture. So you're supposed to picture out the scenario, try to check through the actual documentations that you have, and then see how you can properly redesign the whole architecture from scratch to be able to fit with all these audiences, from developers, product managers, and even the support teams. So in step 1, you can try to first of all list all the documentation sources, and basically that means you have to ensure you have all those resources with you, list them in order, and then try to create a structured inventory spreadsheet. And this is where you're supposed to first of all ensure you have the actual it could be the actual documentation, and try to picture out the audiences. So in this case, we're looking at the engineering team, we're looking at the developers and whether they're active, and then trying to see how you can be able to do all this on Notion, right? And then step 2, we're trying to identify the structural problems, which means you're trying to analyze these documentation weaknesses. Some of the common issues that might include maybe content duplication, where you realize that multiple guides tend to explain the same feature. So how can you be able to ensure that they don't necessarily do that? And then there might be a need for ensuring that at least these multiple platforms can be able to be tweaked in a way that it's easier to find answers. So that element of navigation confusion, again, it's something you were supposed to say and see how you can be able to solve. And then also we're trying to picture out the outdated information bit. Then also we're trying to see audience mismatch. So step 2 is all about trying to identify the structural problems that might arise from the already existing resources or other documentations that you have, right? And then now in step 3, we're trying to look at the map current architecture. So here you're supposed to create a diagram showing how documentation currently exists. And we can have a simple example structure here, like a GitHub with README and the setup guide, and also Notion with product specs and even roadmaps. Then also a help center with custom FAQs. So here you're supposed to come up with what you call a visualization, a visualized fragmentation, just to help you analyze the structure of the whole documentation. Then in step 4, we are trying to see how you can be able to redesign the documentation architecture. So here you're supposed to propose a unified documentation structure, right? So an example could look like this. Let's picture out you're trying to analyze a documentation portal. So you're supposed to check through the product overview, the getting started, the developer documentation, the API reference, the integration guides, troubleshooting, and also release notes, all in a unified um, structure. And that's why we have a documentation portal here with all these structures under them. So this is just you trying to redesign the documentation architecture. Remember up here, most of these documentations were everywhere. So your work now is to see how you can be able to structure them in a more unified way. Then deliverables. Now here you're supposed to produce a documentation audit report, including the documentation inventory, structural problems, redesigned architecture, and even migration plan. So that is all about the engineering lab 1. In engineering lab 2, here you're supposed to now focus on designing a product documentation architecture with an objective of designing a structured documentation system for a new software product. So this will help you simulate work performed by technical writers during product launches. Let's try to picture this scenario. So imagine you're documenting a cloud-based collaboration platform used by engineering teams, and we have like core product features which include team workspaces, real-time messaging, API integrations, analytics dashboards. The documentation system must help you support the developers, the administrators, and even the end users, right? So in step 1, you're supposed to identify the user roles, which means you have to identify different users because they require different documentations. For example, developers, administrators, end users, and even support engineers, all of them are different audiences and they all need um, different kinds of documentations. So how are you going to go about that? Then in step 2, you're trying to, or rather you're supposed to identify the user goals, which means that each role here has unique goals, right? So an example could be developers. Definitely, they're more handy, so they could focus more on integrating APIs, configuring webhooks, and even or even building automation. And then we have administrators. So for administrators, majorly they focus on managing users or just trying to configure permissions and maybe even monitoring system usage. Then we have end users. So for end users, also they focus on maybe creating projects, communicating with team members, or even tracking tasks. So you're supposed to be able to understand how you can identify the user goals of all these audiences, or rather of all these users that you have around you. And as you do that, you have to give them different kind of roles and see how you can be able to tailor your documentation to fit with them. Then in step 3, now you're supposed to create the documentation structure. So you're supposed to design a documentation portal structure with in a more structured way. For example, look at this example. We're trying to see how you can structure all this in a documentation portal. And just like any other documentation out there, you realize that the getting started option is very important, the product overview, just the usual user guides, administrator guides, developer documentation, API reference, integrations, troubleshooting, and even release notes. And then now in step 4, you're supposed to define the topic types. So you're supposed to apply the topic-based authoring. For example, concept topics like what is a workspace, or how messaging works, or even understanding integrations. And then also task topics like create a workspace, invite team members, configure webhooks. And then here we're looking at reference topics like the webhook API reference, user permission matrix, and even supported integrations. And in step 5, we're trying to look at design navigation systems. So you're supposed to define the navigation components here. And this is just a simple example around it. From the sidebar navigation, the search system, breadcrumb navigation, and even the role-based documentation sections. When it comes to the deliverables, you're supposed to produce a documentation architecture blueprint that contains the user role analysis. So which means you have to understand every role of every user, analyze them in detail, and then come up with a documentation structure of that with a topic classification and then with a navigation design. In Engineering Lab 3, now here we're trying to look at the API documentation system design with an objective of rather with the main objective of building a structured documentation system for a REST API. So this exercise reflects real work that is performed by technical writers while trying to collaborate with backend engineers. So this is a little bit much more technical, and we are trying to picture how this technical writer might not be having a tech background. So they have to be able to be in good communication with the backend engineers in a company or a startup. So a scenario here. Imagine and try to picture out an engineering team that has built maybe a payment processing API, and these developers want to integrate the API into the application. So the documentation must include one, the authentication instructions, two, the endpoint documentation, and three, the example requests. Lastly, the troubleshooting guides. So in step one, they're supposed to identify the API documentation components, which means you have to be able to understand what a standard API documentation include, what it encompasses, right? From the API overview, authentication, endpoints, request or response, error codes, rate limits, and even SDKs. And then in step two, you're supposed to look at the document API endpoints, right? So this is just an example of the endpoint documentations. And then in step three, we're trying to look at the how you can be able to create these integration guides, which means you are supposed to develop tutorials. Yes?
Question on
Yes.
step 2.
Okay, Stephanie. Here.
No, step 1. Sorry,
Okay.
step 1.
Okay, here.
So here on the standard API documentation, you've mentioned that you should have authentication.
Yeah.
So what kind of details should we have in this point?
So here you're supposed to be able to, first of all, be in touch with the engineers and be able to get their codes for authentication, the endpoints, and error codes, and be able to now document that this is the actual endpoints for this specific section. Maybe these are the actual authentication, maybe codes for this specific layout. So it's just all about trying to get them and then maybe getting a screenshot and doing a bit of writing down there.
Okay. So like for the error codes, so if you don't get this particular response, what are the different types of errors that you'll be encountering?
Yeah, so you have to also indicate, like, if you don't get this, these are the errors you're supposed to see, and how you can be able to respond to them too, when you're trying to navigate through them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's noted.
Yeah. So in this section, mostly it's all about you and the developers, or rather you and the engineers, being in collaboration. Yeah. I'm not sure if
Okay.
I can be able to get an example of an existing API documentation. Maybe RESTful API. Let me see if I can get the REST API, maybe for Django. Let me go to the so just like how this has been documented here, though we're not seeing the error codes and everything, but just getting to borrow the screenshot from the engineers, then you get put here, then you do your simple writing up here, just to guide the the actual engineers when they're going about the development.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Okay.
thanks.
Okay. Good. Let's continue. So we're in step we're in step two. So here you're supposed to now document the API endpoints, which means you have to picture out the example of these endpoint documentations. So here we have just an example of an endpoint documentation where we have posts and payments with a description where you're supposed to maybe create a payment transaction. And here we have like parameters. So parameters here include amount, currency, or custom ID. And then we have like an example request of a post payment. So here we have like an amount to be 200 and currency to be in USD. So this is just an API endpoint that has been documented here. It's just an example. And in step three, we have like now you getting to create integration guides. So you're supposed to develop tutorials for developers to guide them through. For example, if they're trying to maybe integrate payments with a specific technology, it could be Node.js. Node.js is a programming language, uh, Python, or Java. So you're supposed to develop tutorials for developers to guide them through this integration. In step four, now you realize that there might be some errors that might occur during maybe the development processes, or maybe when the developers are trying to play along with the documentation. So you're supposed to add the troubleshooting documentation part, which is also very important because we always expect errors to occur. So these are common problems that developers faced. One is authentication failures. Two is invalid request parameters, and three we have rate limits. So an example of a troubleshooting guide here could be an error where we have like an invalid API key, and it's caused maybe because there's an incorrect API key configuration there. So the solution is for you to be able to verify the API key in the environment variables. So that is how you get to help the developers troubleshoot, just in case they face any of these challenges. And also, now that we are here, the deliverable now is for you to produce what we call a complete API documentation system. So as a technical writer, this is just a way of you trying to effectively connect with the backend engineers to see how you can be able to communicate well and get the right information from them. And with the ability of breaking down complex concepts in a very simple way, get to interpret all that in a much more structured and simpler format that any other person out there can be able to interpret. So that's a very important thing here. And in engineering lab 4, we're trying to now picture out the user journey documentation mapping. So here, the major objective or the main objective is to learn, or rather, get to learn how to structure documentation based on how users interact with the products. So you have to still understand your users, right? And the products that you're trying to also document. So the key scenario here is a new developer is joining a software team, and the documentation must guide them through one, setting up the development environment, two, understanding the system architecture, and lastly, to contributing the code. So this documentation must guide this developer through these three key areas. How can they be able to effectively set up the development environment? How can they be able to understand the system architecture and also be able to contribute to the code without necessarily interacting with you as an individual or with any other person? How can the documentation that you are going to share with them help them through all this without them struggling? So, step one, you have to map the developer journey. So, you have to just picture out the whole developer journey, right? And an example could be setup, account setup, um, development environment setup, code base overview, running the application, submitting pull requests, and deployment process, right? So, still, even with this knowledge, remember you as a technical writer here, maybe you might have a background in software engineering, or maybe you could be interacting with the actual engineers themselves, so you have an idea of how all this user journey for an engineer looks like. So it's easier for you to picture that out and be able to put it in writing rather than documentation. So with that developer journey, it's easier to now be able to frame everything. And then in step two here, you're not trying to identify documentation for each stage. An example could be development setup with required documentations looking like this. One, installing dependencies. Two, configuring databases. And three, running development service, right? So when you get to identify this documentation for each stage, it's easier for you to be able to now picture out the required documentation and how to go about them. Then in step three, you now get to design this documentation flow. So you're supposed to now structure the documentation sequentially. And an example could be uh, coming up with what we call a developer onboarding guide, just to help them, one, set up the account, two, install these development tools, three, clone this repository, four, run the application, and lastly, explore the code base, right? So the deliverable here is for you to produce what we call a developer onboarding documentation system to help us onboard this new engineer who is coming in, right? So without the developer connecting or interacting with anyone, they expect that, rather we expect that your documentation is going to guide them through every bit of it. So it has to really speak to them, in their own language, in their own understanding. And this is how you get to go about it. In engineering lab 4, you're supposed to build a documentation repository. We call it docs as code. And the objective here is to teach, definitely, all of you how to manage documentation using Git workflows. I was trying to show you how you can be able to just do this quickly, um, and how I've been able to do, even here in Redmi, this whole documentation. Sometimes I tend to use VS Code uh, to go through the structure, just like how you can be able to create a structure for your own development environment. Also, you can be able to do it, in form of docs as code, right? Yeah. So here you realize that your documentation will be hosted in a Git repository, just like I'm doing here. And definitely writers must be able to structure documentation for scalability. An example could be creating a repository structure, right? So one is the docs where you're supposed to get started. And then in the getting started part, you have some segments down there, like the installation.md, the quick start, .md, and then maybe you get to guides like workspace guide and maybe integration guide, and also maybe API. Then under it, you're looking at maybe or authentication, RMD, payments, and errors, blah blah blah. So you can be able to do that on VS Code. I think once you have been able to properly clone your project, it shouldn't be a hard thing. I don't know if I can be able to just share a simple scenario here. Let me see if I can be able to just clone one repository. I have quite a number of them though. Not so sure if we can get just one. I hope it's not going to take a lot of my time though. Most of them are pretty much private. But no pressure, no pressure. We'll okay. Can see one for quick split. No pressure. I will do that later. So, just a clear visual perspective. You're supposed to go about structuring your repository in a way that it's easier to navigate through. Whether you are on VS Code or not, definitely GitHub is even much way easier and better. So you get to do that, then push your changes out there. So that is in step one. You have to come up with that whole repository structure. And then now in step two, you're supposed to write a structured Markdown documentation. So an example topic could be you have to install the application. So you have to look at the prerequisites. It could be you're supposed to install the Node.js and then install the Postgres SQL. And as you do that, now you have to focus on the installation steps, like clone the repository, install the dependencies, configure the environmental variables, and you know do verification where you have to run the application server, and now maybe now contribute to that documentation. In step three, you're not supposed to implement the documentation navigation. So using a documentation generator, examples could be MacDocs or maybe Docsaris of things. I'm not so sure if I can try and show you how all these operate. These are some of the technical writing tools that are very important to be familiar with when you're going through this journey away from Notion and Confluence, and these are also very important. Um, so using these documentation generators like MacDocs, Docsaris, Sphinx, you realize that uh, this example navigation, you're supposed to first of all, focus on getting started. Where you have to install, then go or do a quick start, and then now through the guides you get to look at the workspace guide and the integration guides. So a deliverable, or rather the deliverable here, you're supposed to at least ensure that you have or you get to produce a Git-based documentation repository that is simple and easier to navigate, right? So that is it. But then there's a simple capstone project here, and this capstone project actually it encompasses like everything that we've been able to look at yesterday, and even some things that maybe we have been able to learn today. So you learners are supposed to apply all the skills that we've been able to check through this module. And there's one scenario here where you are hired as the technical writer for a startup building an AI powered project management platform, right? So let's picture out you're a new technical writer for an existing startup that is currently building an AI powered project management platform, and your task is to design the entire documentation system. So you're supposed to check through, first of all, um, the required components. So you're supposed to, you as a student, or rather you as a learner, you're supposed to produce the documentation architecture from scratch, right? So you're supposed to possibly come up with the product overview, the getting started section, the user guides, the developer documentation, the API reference, integration guides, troubleshooting, and even release notes. And then when it comes to the topic-based content model, you're supposed to, check through the concept topics, the task topics, and even the reference topics. And when it comes to the user journey documentation, you're supposed to come up with documentation for one, onboarding, two, daily usage, three, troubleshooting, and lastly, advanced workflows. All right. And then now you're supposed to check through the documentation repository, which means you're supposed to now come up with a Git-based documentation system. I believe that is how you're going to do or deliver your work. And as a submission, you're supposed to share out your documentation architectural blueprint, um, your documentation repository, your topic-based documentation model, and even your user journey documentation map. So these are just some of the engineering labs, or rather task labs, based on what we had covered yesterday. And they're very practical and very, hands-on. So they help you to also try and explore whatever it is that we've been able to learn in class, and try to picture out with the real um, experience, out there. So you're just trying to make sure at least this gets to resemble what's out there from a much more structured perspective. And that is it about uh, this labs for module 3 here, unless anyone has a question before we get to what we were supposed to do today. This was also very important because I wanted to ensure that you can be able to connect um, whatever it is we've been able to learn, and now a real life experience, how it looks like out there when you're now trying to explore, rather check through, connect whatever you've been able to learn in class and what you might be able to expect out there. So this is basically how most of the time things look like. And just by practicing and getting to familiarize yourself with this is very important. Any question up to this point? Any question? Yes, Kathy?
Oh, hi everyone. I wanted to know, how can I get, is it updated on the repository you sent?
Yeah, actually, sorry, I uploaded it pretty late today. Again, let me take you through where it is. When you come here, when you come to the repository section, it's public actually, so I made it public an hour ago, so don't worry, I was just trying to do some updates to it. It's called Technical Writing Engineering Labs. Hope you can see it. This one here.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Yeah, so no worries. So you'll be able to just take your time and review it, and also I will be sharing more of those lab assignments on that repository to give you a much more um, clear perspective on real life um, experiences based on what we are learning here. Any other question based on that? Robert, are you here?
Yes, I'm following up.
Awesome, cool. Stephanie, are we good?
Yes, we are good.
Okay, thank you. Steven, are we great?
I was asking, so is it like an assignment or?
So no, for that one, basically it's, how can I put it? It's a, not really an example, just real life experiences, real life scenarios on how whatever we're learning here is really significant out there, and how you can be able to practice on your own. Most of the assignments that I'll be giving them out to be done over the weekend.
Okay.
Most of the time on Fridays, so that you can be able to get busy over the weekend, and then get to review, or rather get to submit them on Monday or Tuesday, because I understand how crazy the week might look like for most of us. But this real life cases or other scenarios are really significant, and I would like all of you to just, for your own experience, try to go through them and see.
Okay.
Most of the projects are out there. I will be sharing them over on Fridays, actually. Steven, you have something to share?
No.
You're good, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Looks great. So now that we are all here, I would like us to proceed from where we had left yesterday. So yesterday we had covered module 3, and I'm so glad because today you've been able to picture out some of these questions. I don't know if I made a mistake there. Okay. So I think there was an issue with module 4. I did unless yesterday covered something different. Okay, makes sense. Let's look at module 5. I will do an update to module 4. No pressure. Today let's try and look at this. Research, interviews, and gathering technical content for product managers and software engineers. So this is a very important area for us because first things first, you realize that different audiences have different laid out structures, even when it comes to how they conduct the research, how their interviews look like, and even how they get to gather technical content. So today we would like us to try and picture out for product managers and software engineers, but then I would like you to embrace the technical writing atmosphere in you so that you try to picture this out from a technical writer. But now looking at product managers and software engineers as users, or rather as different audiences, right? So you realize that effective technical communication is not just the responsibilities of writers. From product managers and software engineers, gathering, organizing, and even communicating this technical content is crucial for stakeholder alignment, onboarding, and even user understanding. Module 4 reference core techniques like research, interviews, and even technical content gathering for professionals who deeply focus more on embedding all this in the product lifecycle. So PMs and engineers often find themselves authoring specs, user stories, internal documentation, and even product guides, right? So getting to master these foundational tasks help you to enhance collaboration, speed up development cycles, and even improve customer satisfaction. So what how documentation looks for the PMs and how documentation mostly looks for the engineers is more or less different, right? But there's always an intersection, right? In regards to the kind of product that they are building. PMs have to work hand in hand with engineers to ensure that the kind of product they're building is going to be delivered out in time. And PMs also have to work hand in hand with the stakeholders to ensure, or even with the founders, to ensure that the product, rather the software that is being launched out there, is going to be a little bit much more profitable and even has the need for scaling very, very fast. So there has to be some height of intersection. And when it comes to now the documentation, how the authoring is done, how these user stories are created, how these internal documentation and product guides look like, they are much more connected, right? So getting to master these foundational tasks that enhance collaboration, speeds up these development cycles, and even improve customer satisfaction are very important. So let's try to picture out a real life example. So picture out this a PM working at Atlassian, or rather PM at Atlassian working on Jira, sorry. must coordinate with engineering, design, and even the QA teams to document features accurately. So they have to conduct interviews, aggregate engineering notes, and even synthesize this into customer-facing release documentation. So the first one, as a PM, you get to receive conflicting specs from design and engineering. How do you determine the final implementation details? So let's try and just picture this out. You as a PM, you get to receive conflicting specs from design and engineering. How do you determine the final implementation details and maybe even refine it? I think this question goes directly to Stephanie. I'm not sure if you're following. Stephanie? Stephanie here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. How would you go
What's
about
the
this?
question?
Pardon?
Sorry, what's the question?
Oh, the question is, as a PM, you get to receive conflicting specs from design and engineering. How do you determine the final implementation details?
So mainly I ensure whatever I have on the requirements gathering document and the PRD matches what we have with the design as well as the developers. So the PRD is usually the source of truth, and this should inform the kind of designs that are being generated and also will guide the developers on the functional requirements as well as the business requirements. So key thing that I look at is the kind of features that are needed. This also is from a point of now the BRD, get to understand the kind of features that are needed, prioritize the same in terms of the design, try and do a bit of research. How do I envision the end goal of the system? Because as you develop something, there's someone else who's done it before. So are we able to do comparisons with also what other organizations are doing, what other systems are there on ground, see how your application sets apart from these others, and then also find your niche in terms of, yes, you're building for a bank, for an airline. You have other airlines with the same application. So what makes it unique compared to what others are having? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love how you've been able to break it down and come up with different approaches, especially in regards to what has been done before, the the audience, the design team and the engineering team, looking at the documentation, ensuring that yours is in connection to theirs. I think that's very important. So in part one, the art and science of research. So when it comes to the art and science of research, you realize that for PMs and engineers, definitely research is what fuels their decisions, right? So from market needs to system architecture, you have to be able to, first of all, be out there, get to understand what the market needs, and then come back and see how you can be able to design, rather come up with a good system architecture for your product. So unlike general writing, technical research here supports build decisions, feature prioritization, and even development planning in more scenarios. So that aspect of tech research is also very, very important. Let's look at these key research techniques. The first one is what we call competitive analysis, which means you have to study how other platforms solve similar problems. And I think that is what Stephanie was trying to share with us. And also, you're supposed to picture out the customer feedback mining, which means you have to use intercom, NPS responses, and even support tickets. I hope I'm not losing anyone. I hope no one is getting lost here. So when it comes to this, you have to picture out the competitive analysis, the customer feedback mining, and even the technical landscape mapping, where you have to understand the API limitations, infrastructure, or complex boundaries. And then when it comes to cross-functional documentations, you have to pull from design, support, and even legal repositories. So a real life example here could be before launching an AI feature, a product team at Notion investigated open source models, internal infrastructural limits, and even existing plugin ecosystems. So, how you get to do your research as a PM or even as a software engineer is majorly based on as a PM. It's majorly based on the market, and also again your team sometimes really matters a lot. So you have to really understand their capabilities. What can they be able to launch within what duration of time, and also you have to picture out the market, right? But majorly the market, because that is where we have to really put our work out. So when you're going about your research, those are very key things. But now the documentation bit, right? You have to really understand how to go about that, and based on all the different users or all the different teams that you're working with, from engineers, designers, you need to really sit down, have a sit with them, and ensure that the documentation, your documentation, are are in uh, are in agreement. So we have a simple brain teaser here, and I'm not so sure if we should look into it. Picture out you're building an integration, and find three different behaviors across environments. How would you validate the correct approach? So imagine you're building an integration and you get to find three different behaviors across environments. How would you validate the correct approach? Robert,
Yes,
how are you?
I'm good.
How are
I'm
we doing?
following up.
How are we doing today? First of all, let's start from there.
Yes.
How are we doing today?
Yeah, we are good. Actually following up, especially the first part where we started with that new repository.
Okay.
I think I'll have to go back and look at it very, very keenly.
Okay.
But concerning this one,
Yep.
yeah, concerning this one,
Okay.
so in this case,
Yep.
number one thing that we have to ask ourselves
Okay.
at the end, or at the before we build this integration,
Mm-hmm.
what was the intention of coming up or building this integration?
Mm-hmm.
So if we know the end results or the end goal, what we want to achieve at the end,
Okay.
now
Mm-hmm.
having the three different behavior across environments. For instance, if currently I'm working on it on a development environment, then I notice a certain behavior. Then after development, we usually go to the staging where we do the testing, UAT. So we do the UAT, we do all the testing there. Then we notice another behavior. Then once we move to the let's say production,
Mm-hmm.
now we notice another behavior. Now, in this case, we need to ask ourselves, what was the intended purpose of this integration? Now, once we know that, in the three stages that we have to determine which behavior reflects, like, it shows how the end goal of this integration will be. So once we identify which environment it reflected the correct or the intended behavior, then that is the way to, or that is the way to approach it. Yeah, you just check which environment it reflected the embedded behavior. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
That is
Awesome.
how I would approach it.
Yeah, good, good. I like the approach. Someone else, Stephen. How would you go about this, Stephen? Stephen, are you here? Kathy?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Stephen, please.
I'm still thinking about it.
Okay, okay, no pressure. Kathy, would you uh take us through your thought process? You know, that's the most important thing.
Okay, for this one, let me just listen to the feedback.
Okay, super. Um,
Okay.
okay, good. Okay. Stephanie, would you like to share your perspective on that? Stephanie?
Allow me to think about it.
Okay. Okay. So let's proceed. Just to make sure we are flowing well. Part two. So, planning and preparing for interviews. One thing that you realize is that interviewing isn't just for user research. You know, PMs and engineers frequently conduct internal discovery sessions to shape PRDs, align roadmaps, and even gather technical feasibility data. So we have a few steps in the interview preparations, and they're very, very important. One is clarify goals. So you have to focus on goal clarity. So we have to define what you need to learn, and then this could be dependencies, could be timelines, could be blockers. It's good to really understand what exactly it is that you need to learn. And then you also need to know the domain, which means you have to read prior tickets or maybe repos or even notes. So it's very important to do that. And then you have to design smart questions. Like you have to use what if or why questions for insights. And when it comes to the documentation setup, you need to create shared notes or recordings for a sync collaboration. You need to ensure that you get to go through these steps um, in your interview preparation. Most of the time, I think most of them might be, just the usual internal stand-ups or just discovery sessions just to get to hear what's going on the product, how the team is doing, and a few other questions on the loop. So a real life example could be a PM at Shopify is preparing for Q2 roadmap interviews, draft questions about headless commerce strategies and reviews prior architectural decisions. So this is a PM at Shopify who is trying to prepare for Q2 roadmap interviews, interview draft questions about headless commerce strategies and reviews prior architectural design decisions. So you can just try to look into that. And then now this brain teaser here is in regards to you. How do you get to steer an interview when an engineer dives deep into irrelevant technical jargon? So this is a question posed to all of us because in most scenarios you might be mandated to run this kind of maybe uh, uh, a standard or just an interview. So you've been mandated to steer an interview when an engineer dives deep into irrelevant technical jargon. So how would you actually go about this? How would you go about this? I would like Kathy. Kathy, would you like to take this up? Okay. How do you steer an interview when an engineer dives deep into irrelevant technical jargon?
Okay, you can. I don't know if kindness is allowed, but you can kindly like redirect him to your goals of the interview.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be one way. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Beautiful.
Uh, actually, I wanted to hear how others will handle this one, because this is something that I've experienced. There was a day um, I I came up with the proposal of having a job linkage system,
Okay.
whereby it was using a WhatsApp chatbot.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was a day we had just a general meeting, and everyone was there, and I was the only tech guy in that meeting. So all the questions were coming to me direct, and the way I was answering them, I was using technical terms and jargons, and everyone was. So what is now this production server? What is this cloud server? What is Bo? And it was like, wow, how am I going to explain all this? But again, from that day, our manager was very sharp, and one thing that I noticed, he acknowledged the technical knowledge that I have, but then he redirected me politely to the context. Now, in this case, you acknowledge the technical, like the technical jargon that this technical guy or technical team have. Then once you acknowledge it, you redirect in a polite way to bring into a helpful context, so that the tech guy will use a simple term to explain what he is explaining. Now, another thing is to refocus, like that interview, you just bring it back to the objective. Remember, when doing this interview, you as the tech guy, in the back of your mind, you know what you will do. But in that interview, you don't need to give the technical aspect of it. You just give the general or the simple term that everyone will understand. So you, as the person steering this interview, you need to refocus to the objective, so that we can have something meaningful, rather than having deeper and deeper technical terms. Yeah, that is how I would do it. So first thing is, you acknowledge, yes, you acknowledge first the technicality of the system, or the terms that is using. Then you refocus a bit to the main objective. Yeah.
Awesome. Robert, seems you had a real life experience, so this is um, so good to picture out based on your experience out there. Great. Thank you. Someone else who would like to share with us how they will go about this? Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Robert. So we have Stephen and Stephanie. Uh, Stephen,
Let me give it a try.
please do.
For me, I think I will just use like simple language,
Okay.
and asking more direct questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Stephanie.
I'll say the same thing, similar to what Robert experienced, because you'll find that when you carry developers to business discussions, there are technical terms that are mentioned, and you find that the business do not understand. So, how best I'm able to tackle this is trying to explain also from a technical level. Coming from a technical background, I'm able to understand what is needed from a technical perspective and having to break that down now to the business. As Robert had mentioned, yes, you want a production server, but the business do not understand that. They do not understand what .150 or .69 mean. For them, they would like to know how the work is supposed to be done and how they see it from their end. So how I'd steer an interview from this is mainly to address, yes, that there was something technical that was mentioned, but then take that technical term and break it down in a better way for the business to understand. So more like you have your audience. So it's the business who are not technical, so they need to be explained to on how that particular feature is going to be developed. So that's the answer for brain teaser day. And then for the second one, the one for the integration, I believe we have various environments that are used during development, which is the dev environment, the UAT, and the prod. So try replicate that same issue that has been identified on the dev environment. And if it happens, it means there's an issue with the code. And then you go into the UAT environment. UAT speaks more into the production environment. So if you experience an issue in the UAT environment, highly likely the same issue is available in the prod environment. So that's how we would validate the different behaviors.
Thank you. Nice. Back to you, Robert. Robert, so far from your experience, especially after that day, have you been experiencing the same thing, and what has been different?
Yeah, actually, it's not the first time I've experienced it. Actually, I think it is something that I've struggled a lot with when it comes to explaining to the management, the CEO about a project or a system. I usually find myself going deeper into the technical terms rather than using a simple term for them to understand. Until there was a day our CEO told me, Robert, you need to write to us as a 2-year-old child so that we can understand your terms. From that day, nowadays what I usually do is mostly I explain in simple term, and sometimes I use analogies to explain some scenarios so that they will understand what it means. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. But from what you've been able to learn up to this juncture, what are some of the things that you have to put into consideration when communicating technical terms out there?
Number one thing is to know the audience, the people you are communicating to. Just know who are they. Are they technical guys, or they're just the normal guy who they need to understand a simple term? So the first thing is to understand the audience. Then number two is to use a simple statement, or let's say an overview, which is very simple for them to understand. So that is the second thing. Number one is to identify the audience, who are they, then give an overview of a simple overview of what, let's say if it is a system, of what that system will do. Yeah.
Thank you. Those are two things. I'm not sure if there are other more that you have not been able to share with us.
There are others.
Okay. No worries, but I'm glad that you've been able to picture out your audience as the first and the very most important thing before any other thing, because it's good to know who you're interacting with, and also getting to understand what are they really looking at from whatever it is you're going to present or share with them. What is the expectation, and um, can you supersede the expectations? Based on whatever it is you've been able to present, or maybe you've been able to build. It could be a tech product that is solving maybe a specific problem in agriculture, and you've really been technical with a lot of things. You've translated, just making sure to make sure that specific kinds of features are implemented in the actual software, but now you like to present it to them. You like to share with them, hey, we rather have been translating building this product, and this specific two features, which could be just mere buttons, took you almost 2 nights to build and implement. And you have to really explain this in a way that they get to see the importance of you translating for those 2 days for those two buttons. Something that to them might be like, what do you mean you took 2 days implementing this button, right? So you really have to understand your audience, understand them from where they're coming from, and see how you can effectively communicate to them and make them see whatever it is you're trying to share, and possibly even um, exceed the expectation. I don't know, but the core thing is understand your audience and ensure that aspect of connection is clear based on whatever it is you're here to present to them. Thank you so much for that, everyone. Let's proceed. Let's proceed. We were just looking at Brain Teaser 3. How do you steer an interview when an engineer dives deep into irrelevant technical jargon and things so far? We have been able to look at that from our own experiences. Part 3, conducting interviews with stakeholders and SMEs. So, whether syncing with backend leads or customer support, remember that your goal is to extract accurate, actionable insights, right? So, efficient interviewing saves time, reduces miscommunication, and improves delivery at the end of the day. So whether you're syncing with backend leads or customer support, your goal is to extract accurate, actionable insights. Efficient interviewing saves time, reduces miscommunication, and even improves deliverables. So let's look at some of the best practices here. One, always try to build a rapport. Always try to build rapport. Start casual and show you've done your homework, right? How do you get to do this? It was basically uh, just trying to be cordial with someone, but in a way that they're able to know that you're familiar with them, right? Even though you guys are meeting for the first time, you've done your homework. You've gotten to understand who this person is based on maybe some of the research that they've been able to publish, or some of the projects they've been able to build, some of the partners they've been able to work with. It's just good to really get to know who you are talking to. So that aspect of building rapport is super cool. And then translate needs, right? Try to frame these technical requests in terms of business outcomes. Actually, this is very important because every bit, or rather anything technical, if it's not solving a problem, it's not, it's not bringing some element of, rather, it's not bringing some element of business in it. Sometimes people don't really like to give some attention to it. So it's good to really translate the needs of whatever technical thing you're trying to share. So frame technical requests in terms of business outcomes, and then capture action items. Capture action items. So this could be not decisions, blockers, and even next steps. So you need to at least try to note these kinds of decisions, these kinds of blockers, and some of the next steps there. Confirm assumptions. Always try to confirm assumptions. So try to paraphrase inputs and verify them. Try to paraphrase inputs and verify them. So a real life example could be a software engineer at Stripe interviews a security engineer about PCI scope before writing deployment scripts for a payment feature. A software engineer at Stripe interviews a security engineer about PCI scope before writing deployment scripts for a payment feature. So a brain teaser here. This is a brain teaser 4. Your SRE gives high-level answers about system load balancing. How do you get the necessary low-level details of your deployment plan? Okay, before we go too far, what is SRE? Your SRE gives high-level answers about system load balancing. So how do you get the necessary low-level details of your deployment plan? Who is an SRE, first of all? Who is an SRE, Simon?
Okay, SRE, in full, this is a site reliability engineer.
Okay.
The main thing is usually to bridge the gap between development and operation, and mostly they usually do the automation. That is to for instance, if you're coming up with a system and there is a team that is developing it, now for that system to fully be operational, so that SRE, that is where it comes in. I don't know how to explain it in simple terms.
Robert,
Yeah.
try to explain it in the most simplest way you can. I mean, even communication is important.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Can you give it a shot again?
Yeah, I can give.
Okay, try again.
Try. Okay. So these are the SRE. They bridge the gap between now the development. For instance, there is a team that is coming up with a system. Let's say, let me use this example that we were working on. Job, whereby it's a portal where it locates people. Let me explain this system. So it's a system where we have a portal for the employer. We have the portal for a job seeker. So the employer posts a job, then the job seeker, he looks at that system to find a job. Then there is a place where the employer, he will search for a job seeker, but he will have to pay for a credit. Now, this is a system of its own. But for this system to be operational, because not many employers are just busy using the system, now the SRE comes in and say, look, we have a system, yes, but how are we going to use this system to be operational so that we can have a system that is very quick and very easy to use. So the SRE comes and say, okay, let's integrate this system with a WhatsApp chatbot. Let's integrate this system with a Telegram bot so that when someone chats with it, it connects automatically with the whole system. So this is where the SRE comes in. The part of linking the WhatsApp bot to the whole system. So that is now the automation part. So that is the work SRE comes in. Yes.
Thank you, Robert. Kathy, I know you don't have a very strong technical background, I would like you to kindly just tell me, or rather tell us, if you've been able to hear what Robert has explained in a very simple term.
I've had like I've understood everything, but his last statement has made sense, where the SRE is the one who's going to link how the chatbot will, or how the chatbot will link with the whole automation system.
Thank you. So, based on what Robert has been able to explain to us, would you kindly try to simplify it from your own perspective in very simple terms?
Let me see.
Okay. Um, as you're trying to see, Stephen, would you like to give it a shot?
The brain teaser, or
No. Leave alone
I
the
can
brain.
help with
Yeah, based on what Robert has shared with us, yeah, on what uh, site reliability engineer is.
okay. From what I've heard, I think just somebody is responsible for making the systems run efficiently and more reliable. Then if I've answered.
Thank you. Thank you. Kathy, are you ready?
Let me give it another shot.
Okay.
So you see, like the technical team in a business or in a company, okay, the people who work with code or the backend staff, there's that group, and then there's this other group that deals with the operations. I think the SREs will will help combine that technical part and how stuff is supposed to be run. That's what is supposed to do.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Super. So now that we've been able to know who an SRE actually is, a site reliability engineer. So your site reliability engineer gives high level answers about system load balancing. How do you get the necessary low level details for your deployment plan, right? So how do you majorly get to go about this? So first of all, you're supposed to ask more specific questions. Actually, um, there's the first principle thinking framework where you get to dissect everything into their most fundamental parts and be able to reason up from that. So it's a very good methodology when it comes to design thinking or just thinking in general. So by getting to ask very simple but specific questions, um, it helps you to get to understand like the details, the nitty-gritties of everything. You might not be knowledgeable about maybe an industry in aerospace, um, or maybe or in automotive engineering, for example, you might not be knowledgeable in that sector, maybe in civil, or but just by getting to ask simple but specific questions, trying to dig in, slowly, by getting to ask those questions that lead to another step further, like that, you might be able to really understand the whole architectural design of something just from that simple analysis, or just that simple overview, and then get to connect everything from there. So from this perspective, it's good to really ask the simple questions, um, and they have to be very specific, and they have to also be targeted with follow-up. So instead of accepting this high level answer, it's good to keep digging with precise questions, like, for example, which load balancing methods are we using, and now from there you're able to know, oh, so there are these types of load balancing methods. Maybe what's the health check endpoint, and maybe the exact success or failure criteria here, or are we doing layer 4 or layer 7 balancing, what's the backend pool name in the configuration, are sessions. So just getting to understand the right questions to ask helps you to understand the details, right? And get to the nitty-gritties of it. So don't stop at the high level answer that we already have here. Politely but persistently ask narrower and narrower questions until you get the concrete numbers. Could be names, or even settings that you actually need for your script or your documentation. So that's the skill that this brain teaser is trying to test here. How good are you at extracting precise technical details from people who tend to say vague or very high level things. So you might not be very technical, or you might not really be technical at all, but just getting to have this question, and at least you have someone to ask, it's you can be able to learn a lot of things just from this. So that element of trying to extract these precise technical details from people who tend to say vague and high level things is very, very important, because even for them, they will be able to see, or rather be able to picture out their thought process, and see whether they actually understood whatever it is they're trying to do or say, or not. So that is basically what this brain teaser is all about. It's just trying to test how far you can be able to dig into different perspective, different scenarios. But so far so good. Great work, everyone. Great work. Let's look at part 4, gathering and validating technical content. So from syncing GitHub issues to integrating Swagger docs into Confluence, the content you collect must be validated, structured, and also version controlled. We have various kinds of content gathering strategies. And the first one is breakdown systems. So you need to use architectural diagrams or service maps. 2, you have to use trace dependencies, which means you have to know what data flows where and how often does it flows there. And then you need to link repositories and docs. So you need to create like a single source of truth, right? You also need to like automate discovery. You have to use tools like Backstage or Postman for live endpoints. Um, for Backstage and Postman, these are tools that are used for testing APIs, and most of them are open source. So a real life example here, Colby. At Netflix, engineers update internal documentation on edge services by linking Swagger specs directly into Markdown-based repositories, right? At Netflix, engineers tend to update internal documentation on edge services by linking Swagger specs directly into Markdown-based repositories. Then we have Brain Teaser 5. Brain Teaser 5. So here, two developers disagree on how an API should behave under edge conditions. So how do you proceed from there? two developers disagree on how an API should behave under edge conditions. How do you proceed from there? I would like Stephanie to answer these questions. Two developers disagree on how an API should behave under edge conditions. How do you proceed from there? Someone, Stephanie, please. Stephanie, if you're here, or someone else can pick it up.
Give me some time to think about it.
Okay. Who would like to give it a shot?
Everyone. Sorry, agent clicked.
Okay.
First, you want to make sure you're talking about the exact, they're both talking about the exact same scenario. Because it could be disagreeing, perhaps because the edge case itself isn't clearly defined. So, you want to look at what responses is each developer proposing. Are they making any assumptions? So we make sure that we're all on the same page. If there's any documentation, right, you want to check that because they're working off of a reference point. What does the reference document say? What's the expected behavior? So that whatever decision we make is not driven by preference, it's driven by what the expectation is. Yeah, and then because ultimately you're solving a business, you want to look at the impact, even as they disagree. What's the impact to the end user, right? And perhaps you want to make a decision based off of that. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, good. Will someone give it a shot again? Who would like to give it a shot? Someone? Stephanie, are we somewhere?
I would say the PM can come in to document the different instances that will be experienced. So maybe if there are null values, what is the expectation for that? If there's an error for 400, what are the expectations for that? So we can have the different scenarios coming out in the documentation, and I believe this will assist in creating harmony with the two developers.
Okay, so here we have two developers who are disagreeing on how an API should behave under edge conditions. So we're trying to picture out these APIs. First of all, who has created these APIs? Are they these developers, or it's an existing API out there that already has its own documentation, and if that's the case, what should we do? Because we definitely expect that if the documentation actually exists, already exists, then this is not the first time this is happening, or rather it should be the first time this is happening. It means that it had happened and it had been corrected before, so that documentation should act as the truth. Yeah. But now an instance where two developers now get to disagree on that. that basically can mean that this is the first time they're maybe building this API solution. Maybe this is the first time they're interacting with the documentation, and this documentation maybe it's new. So how do you get to go with this? Unless I'm trying to make everything, ambiguous. Robert, are you here?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. Take us through this.
Let me think of it.
Okay. Okay. I can see we are running out of time here, but this brain teaser here requires some thought process. I would be glad if we put some start to it and think through it later. Part 5. Collaborating with cross-functional teams. I would beg to pause here because you can see it's already 10 p.m. Our time is up. I will beg to just pause here. So tomorrow we should proceed from here, and I'll be so happy if I get to hear your perspective on this brain teaser first thing tomorrow. So you can take your time and think through it. You have the whole day tomorrow, and then we'll try and see whether we have some answers to it. In the meantime, you can take your time. I think today the recording is also on, so it's good. I will be happy to see how far this will go. So far, is there anyone with a question up to this juncture?
I do have a question. That brain teaser,
Yes.
is there a particular point of view you want us to lean towards?
Okay. You're asking whether there's a point of view that I would like you all to think through or to look at, right?
Yes.
Super. Okay, so I don't know if I should go back to it again so that we get to picture out what's going on there. So two developers disagree on how an API should behave under age conditions. So how do you proceed? Definitely, there are different perspectives to look at here, and I think it will be in order. First of all, if we try to picture out that the documentation already exists for this specific API, then definitely we'll have to use it as a reference point, and the PM will have to now come in as a mediator to guide the developers in ensuring that the API here is actually supposed to look at to behave like this, based on how it has been implemented maybe in the past. But what about if there is no documentation and these two developers are trying to build this API for the first time, right? And as they're building this API for the first time, they're the first people who are supposed to also come up with the technical documentation of this actual API. So that's the perspective that I'm trying to look at, and I don't know if it's a little bit off, but just trying to look at it. Building a startup for the first time and you're trying to build like an API, but then there are different kind of edge conditions that might erupt based on the API that you're going to implement. How do you get to proceed from there? Do you get to allow the developers to implement the API and test those edge conditions and observe them, maybe iterate, or how would you go about it? That's the perspective I was trying to see and hear from all of you. And I'm not so sure if we've been able to get it home. So, well, how do you say it?
So that context helps now.
Pardon?
Yeah. I'm saying when you give it that context, that helps, so that we are not all over the place. Also,
Got you.
we
Awesome.
also coming in creatively with
Yeah.
what we think
Yeah.
two developers should, how we would handle the situation.
Yeah. Super. I think you've got it. That aspect of creativity is also very important. Just trying to picture out how will you also think outside the box and see how you can come up with a way forward based on that perspective. Thank you. Any other question? Any other question? I wouldn't wish to keep you all here for this while. Any other question?
You upload the recording for today.
Come again? Well.
Will you upload the recording today's session? I missed the first time. Actually.
Oh, yeah. So, I hope you got yesterday's though.
Yes, I did. Yesterday I was present. Okay.
Yeah, you're available. This one is on YouTube actually. Let me upload this one. The one for yesterday is on YouTube. This one for today, I'll upload it there too. So you'll get it there. Don't worry about it. Well, yeah, and yeah, I think the video will guide you through, especially through the engineering labs that we've been able to talk about, and how you can also try and just review them on your own free time. They're super important just to get you hands on those exercises there. So hopefully, good. You'll look into them. Great. Any other question after this juncture? Any other question? How was today? I think today I'll just get one feedback, maybe from Kathy. Kathy, how was the session today? And then we just call it a night.
I think from my own perspective, it's getting more broad, and I know it's a lot, but it can be learned. Yeah, so I enjoyed the explanations and the engineering lab session. That part I also learned, and I'm looking forward to going back to it and reviewing on my own time, and also the brain teasers. So I enjoyed all of it.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy. Okay, good. I think that's enough for today, unless someone has something they would like to share with us. Is there anyone who has something they would like to share with us? Awesome. If there's nothing, or if there's no one, I think it will be in order if I call it tonight. And I want to thank you so much, everyone, for finding time to be here. Our classes start at exactly 8 p.m. So tomorrow, let's try to be here at exactly 8 and start early so that you can finish early. In the meantime, I wish you all a beautiful night ahead of you, and please take good care of yourselves. Cheers.
Thank you and good night too.
Thank you, Robert.